Okay, so you've got to love a history lesson, right? And particularly when we get to geek out with details. But this time, and I probably need to remember to stand in front of the mic if things are being recorded. Yeah, thank you, buddy. I'm a terrible wanderer, and I know I'm going to walk in front of the slides, but bear with me. This time we're actually going to talk about the people side of things and how this new wave of AI might impact our role, our jobs, everything that we do. You may be and I need to say, Kat, I saw you look at me when you're trying to work out if you're over, above, and you came up with 80, right? I have been in the industry for 40 plus years, it's more than 40 years, and I've worked at every level of the stack from designing integrated circuits to enterprise architecture. And so this is really a bit of a look back at waves of technology change and even predating me. You may have heard the story of the Sultan who asked his wise men for a phrase that would help him be wise and cope in seasons of both joy and sorrow. And they apparently came back with just 4 words: "This too shall pass." And so this isn't the first big wave, AI, that our industry has had to face, right? It's not an old, it's not a new feeling, this uncertainty. You know, we're in the middle of a gold rush, and every vendor, every venture capitalist, every keynote will tell you about this big thing, this wave that's coming, and how you're all going to have to adapt, and this will change everything. But with that hype comes the anxiety. Is it going to take my job? Is there any future for software developers? Should I let my kids learn programming and languages? What's really going to happen? So I thought I'd take us through a little bit of a set of waves. You know, if you live and work in the Illawarra, let me just go back. If you live and work in the Illawarra, you don't even have to look out the window. You know that waves come in sets. And I thought what we would do is look at the pattern of waves coming through and the hype that builds around it, and then the anxiety that builds, and what we can learn from those. And so the first one I want to look at is the 1700s, the late 1700s, the Industrial Revolution, and the big scary thing at the time, the terrifying new technology, was the leaving womb. Try again, that's birth. No, the weaving loom. Okay. The weaving loom. And the Luddites would take, big beams of timber and throw them in the machinery to destroy it. And they weren't just vandals, they were absolutely terrified that this new technology would destroy their livelihood, right? That low-skilled workers with these machines could do the same job that their middle-class professional artisan years of doing things, and it was a frightening thing. If you fast forward a bit over a century, 100 years, we get into the early 1900s, 1913, the assembly line did it again. And the complaint was exactly the same. It's dehumanising work. No longer did you have the master craftsman who built an entire car, but you actually had a system of systematised, standardised tasks, and the car rolled down the assembly line and you ended up with a vehicle. Only about half a century this time, notice the pace accelerating, only about half a century this time, we get the 1970s and the big threat, the electronic calculator. I mean, it will make our kids stupid, right? They won't be able to make change, they won't be able to do real math, or maths, if you're Australian, math for our visitors, right? And I love this. Look at this. Math teachers protest against calculator use. Wow. Now we're down to just decades. In the 1980s, it became personal, and by personal, I mean, I started my first IT job in 1984. And that was when real companies, serious companies, didn't take personal computers seriously, right? They were toys. But desktop computing created a real set of interim jobs, just like with the mechanical loom. We actually got mechanics, believe it or not. That's the Industrial Revolution birthed the whole profession of mechanics, loom fixers, who could actually fix these newfangled machines. We had interim jobs from the 1980s, right? Is anyone actually old enough to remember when word processing operator was a real job title? I mean, our receptionist went on maternity leave and we hired a receptionist / word processing operator. What about webmaster? How long since you saw that at the bottom of a web page, right? Webmaster, right? That was back in the 90s when full stack meant that you could configure the Apache server, deal with the per status code error pages, and respond to the emails that came to webmaster@yourdomain.com to fix the static dead links. These interim jobs were really important because they were the seed to the dot-com boom that came and really set off the whole of our profession, really. But they don't exist anymore. They were bridging jobs. What happened was the value moved up again. The value constantly moves up the stack. So finally we get to a disruption, we get to this century, and a disruption that you will all be familiar with, the cloud. And if I think you've probably heard the same critique again, right? It's not safe. You can't put your stuff in public cloud. It's insecure. You can't trust it unless I can see my server that I can wrap my arms around in the data center with its own blinking lights. And I think you said 2006 CAT was EC2s, and then the trickle of people actually moving, other than just startups doing, not Beanstalk, that was later, doing Ruby on Rails development. Other than a few startups, the main migrations didn't start till 2009 to 2010s. And we're still doing them. As a consultancy at Mantle, we still help companies move from out of their data centers into the cloud, and the resistance is the same. And you'd recognise it. I'm sure you'd recognise it. This real sysadmins don't do cloud. But there's this repeating pattern, right? And we see this same recurring pattern. A new technology appears, the hype from the vendors explodes, and so does the anxiety. It'll devalue our craft, right? It will make us lazy. It's cheating. AI, is it cheating? Why do we get stuck in this loop? Because we've moved up the stack each time and continue to find a new way to add value. But smart people, it's not because we're dumb. It's actually because we've got a deep-seated cognitive bias, one that you can see repeating in history over and over again, but I can't see formally named in the literature, so I've come up with a term for it. It's called technological anchoring bias, which is the unconscious belief that the technology or tool we know best is the task itself. Let me say that again slowly because it's really important. It's the unconscious belief that the technology or tool that we know best, that we cut our teeth on, is the task or the concept that we're trying to understand. Like, we can't do maths if we don't do it mental arithmetic, but why do we only learn our times tables up to 12 times 12 then? It is the concept, that is the task itself. And, cloud is a really good example of this. I mean, you've all seen the T-shirt, and I reckon you could all complete the phrase, right? There's no such thing as cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. Now, technological anchoring bias, I can't even say my own fancy name. Technological anchoring bias. We've anchored the idea of compute in all its forms, from virtualization, virtual machines, containers, functions as a service, whatever it is, to physical hardware, not just physical hardware, that you own. You have to pay for it. You can't even lease it off IBM, right? You have to actually have this stuff, and it's got to be in your data center where you can see it, and you can see that it's there, a physical server with the blinking lights and the cables plugged in behind the corporate firewall, because that's the only safe place to be. But as an industry, we adapted and we overcame. I mean, when that first EC2 service came out, I think it was 2 nines availability, right? 99% uptime. How can you build a reliable service with that? Well, we figured out that, we stopped anchoring to the physical tasks of the hardware and we re-anchored to the value, the strategic outcome. And so we learned to adapt and overcome and actually scale and automation by building self-healing systems. So that brings us to, of course, today. This pattern is repeating, this idea of hype, anxiety. The hype is here. Certainly as I talk to my peers and colleagues, they wonder about their future and what it will look like, so the anxiety is here. And that same voice of resistance is here, and I reckon it's here in this room as well. Real developers write their own code, surely, right? Time to git reset hard our DevOps biases. And, they say that sacred cows make the best hamburgers, so let's have a look at where AI is really already impacting what we do for a living. If you start over here, you know, in the creative sort of side of things, before we get to the how, we have to do the what and the why, the plan phase. And AI is already making its presence felt. You might be familiar with Jira AI. You can throw a vague idea at it and it will spit out an entire epic with a whole bunch of pre-filled detailed user stories. I think you can even get it to do story points, right? And it'll tell you how much work it's going to be. I don't know whether that factors in if you're using Claude code or not. But it's big, but there is a big but. It has no idea of your business context, no idea of your customer, your strategy, or your budget. And so this level, the tools need high supervision. It's a powerful assistant, but you are still very much the architect. As we move over to code, this is probably the area where almost, look, who is using some kind of AI to write code in any kind of form? Okay, all right, look, the whole room. I don't know that was anyone, don't be embarrassed if you didn't put your hand up. But seriously, I mean, we know this stuff. It's GitHub Copilot, it's Amazon Q for developers, it's it's Claude Code, it's Client, it's all those things. And it helps us write boilerplate and unit tests and generate stuff. But what it really does, it helps us move our value up the stack, right? We don't have to be fast and accurate typists anymore, right? I mean, that was a core skill. Rather, we get to focus on reviewing a junior colleague's work, if you think of your agentic development stuff as someone who writes this stuff, and we get to have a look at it before the PR gets merged. We become resource allocators, quality guardians, and systems thinkers. And we get to validate the AI's confidently generated code to make sure that it doesn't fall into that classic trap of being confidently wrong, right? That it's genuinely operationally sound. Okay, now we move down here to build and test, which a lot of people think of as the engine room of DevOps, right? Our CI/CD pipelines. And we love to think that our pipelines help us remove friction and deliver velocity and all this stuff, right? But has anyone committed a small change and waited 45 minutes for all the tests to run? Oh, yeah, I see a few nods and hands. Yeah, might have been there already. I might resemble that remark. As the systems get larger and more complex, it's easy for that feedback loop to elongate and for throughput to drift. And I mean, let's face it, after all, if you want to remove the manual gates, the safe thing to do is run all the tests, right? And so we end up with this bloat of every unit test running because I did a small commit in this area of the code. Encouragingly, we're seeing some AI inroads into this, and by all means, if there's a deterministic way to do this rather than a large language model, you should. You should try and work out how you tell it which code to run, a test to run based on your commit. But there are AI tools that will understand the dependency graph at a much deeper level than any of us can and work out from the files that are touched in the commit and the changes which tests make sense to run. And the CloudBees is one example. The crunch down of the time is from hours to minutes. Yeah. And in fact, if you believe CloudBees' website, from days to hours. Anyone running a CI/CD test suite that runs days? Not me, thank God. Okay. It also, again, this one represents, it's not just faster horses or more horses to help you go faster. This is a change of category, not just degree, because we get to refocus our value from writing tests and configuring pipelines to thinking about how we instrument the system to enable risk-based prediction. Think about instrumenting your pipelines at every level to enable risk-based prediction. So we're not pipeline mechanics anymore, we're architects of intelligent, risk-aware systems. Put that on your CV. And this automating the core of DevOps, this sort of this automation part in the CI/CD pipeline allows us to tighten that loop with automation, and we can keep the flywheel of productivity running longer without us involved when we give to our agentic AI things that we would use as developers. So we already give our developers linters, security scanning tools. Well, by using MCP servers, Model Context Protocol, you can give the same non-deterministic AI that writes code access to the deterministic tools. And so what ends up happening is that the AI doesn't just run the tests, right? It uses the results, it rewrites the code, it runs the security scan, it gets a deterministic fail feedback, it fixes its own vulnerability, and it re-verifies all before we even see the PR. that flywheel of productivity spins for longer without human intervention, and it's another case of our values shifting from finding a bug to architecting a self-healing system that finds and eliminates the bug before we even get to see it. Okay, now we get to the scary part. Release and deploy. I mean, everyone knows that when you're getting out to production, that's where the stakes are highest, right? So anyone here ever been a member of the Church of Hope-Driven Development? you know, staring at Grafana dashboards and just praying that nothing goes wrong while simultaneously tailing logs across 3 different terminals, because, like, you know, only 2 terminals would be way too little panic, right? I mean, or maybe AI could help us with things like that. Or actually, maybe you're not. Maybe you're a veteran of AOps and you're of DevOps, and you're used to being the boots on the ground that can confidently do a manual deploy and validate it carefully, and like, you've been around for a long time. Well, it turns out AI is really good at this space in terms of deployment, and we don't have to be the grunts on the ground in the turmoil of house-to-house urban combat anymore, right? We get to catapult up to the situation room. Tools like Harness provide automated canary analysis, and AI becomes our autonomous agent in the field, and we're sitting there in the situation room watching it happen. It's got a superhuman ability to spot degradation of stuff across correlating. You know, we can probably correlate 3 or 4 metrics to an incident. It can look at dozens, possibly more, and work out before we even start to notice the degradation that something's gone wrong and trigger an automatic rollback. Our role moves back from the action to some degree. Right? We're not fighting the battle, we're defining the rules of engagement. But it goes even further. With the emergence of AI-driven risk prediction, our role evolves again. From being in the situation room, which was already in advance, to being the strategists in the pre-op and post-op debrief. The system predicts the likelihood of a mission success before it even begins, based on PR commit history of that developer and the part of code and code base and whether that's fragile or not, and based on those patterns of previous deployments. Our new higher value job becomes analysing those patterns and using the insight to further train the machine learning and the AI, making future predictions more accurate. We've moved from real-time intervention to asynchronous strategic improvement. All right, we're nearly there. Stay with me. Operate and monitor. If release and deploy is the high stakes, operate and monitor is the place where you're most likely to get overwhelmed. I mean, is anyone here drowned in a sea of logs trying to find that needle in a haystack of what happened, right? Pattern matching. This is where AI's superpower really comes to play. We can do a little bit. AI can spot it. You know, all those familiar tools you've been using for log correlation and everything else are adding AI. So Datadog and Dynatrace and all their competitors are moving beyond simple sort of threshold alerting and simple baselining based on means and averages to actually searching for patterns and baselining it, right? And subtle variations that might signal impending problems that we might not see as patterns in the data. It allows us to move from sort of firefighting with all this noise to actually becoming proactive strategists guided by intelligent signals. Now, here's where I need to pause, right? Because if you've been in this game any length of time, your technological anchoring bias should be going off right now, right? Anyone standing up here on a stage telling you that, you know, particularly if they're a vendor, trying to sell you a bottle of AI snake oil and say that, you know, baselining your normal behaviour doesn't require anything of business context and everything else, you'd be right to be cynical. Correlation doesn't necessarily... let me put it like this. Just remember that 100% of people who confuse correlation with causation will die. So really be sensible about how you deploy these tools, but there's a future coming that actually allows us to get smarter about our operations. And, you know, anything that stops someone being woken up in the middle of the night is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. But what if we did? What if we had that magic wand, right? Where, you know, because what if the AI tools that we have available today, which are pretty amazing, are the poorest they will ever be from now into the future? Because they are. What if they get better with every release? Because there's a pretty good probability that they will. What might we dare to expect of AI in DevOps? Other things that aren't being done yet, but might be there. So I just want to do some dreaming with you, right? If AI is getting good at spotting patterns in machine data, what happens when we point that superhuman power at the human part? Because after all, we talk about DevOps being about culture, about people process tools, okay? The people part, what happens if we were to not just monitor the tools with AI, but the entire system, including the wetware and the people and the organic components? If we start asking questions like, can AI find patterns in user behaviour, logs that predict an outage before latency actually spikes? Imagine transforming operating and monitor from watching lagging indicators to intervening based on leading predictors. Or what if we step back and applied the same level of thinking to the whole pipeline, to the whole infinite loop, I should say. So, I've tried to slam up there my quick tour through this. But what happens, actually, let me ask, when you see that infinite loop, what do you see? Do you see a set of tasks, a set of processes? Maybe you see a badge of identity, something that gives you purpose and meaning, and this is what I do for a living. What if we asked an AI agent to analyse commit history, like I talked about before, PR comments, Slack activity, and find patterns that would predict team burnout? Or maybe hidden knowledge silos within your organisation? How does that kind of thinking change our future, our position, our roles in this sort of brave new world of AI-augmented value creation? Instead of platform engineers that keep the stuff running, or software engineers embody the essence of you build it, you run it, we get to be data scientists of a socio-technical software delivery system. We use AI not just to keep the machines running, but to make the entire system, including the organic components, you and me, more effective. When we look at it this way, our DevOps future, it's really clear, is not going to be automated away. It's going to be grounded with a human in the loop, rather than something that doesn't happen anymore. The more you scale AI, the more you need to scale the supervision of AI to get the value out of it. Our human value isn't disappearing, it's shifting, it's moving up the stack, as it always has, away from the execution of routine tasks and firmly towards the uniquely human skills of judgment, strategic oversight, ethical consideration, creative problem finding. So the question becomes, what does it mean for DevOps itself, for our craft, for our future as developers and DevOps engineers? AI is not going to make DevOps weird, it's just going to elevate it, in my opinion. If we look at all the ways AI is being used across that cycle, it's automating tasks, but it's not automating purpose. Our role has always been to deliver value to our customers safely and quickly, increasing velocity while de-risking delivery. That purpose remains, but how we achieve it is changing, just the way that the how has always changed with every wave of technology that comes through. The how changes, but not the purpose. So we shift from our mastery of the YAML and the way too many YAML things and the toil of keeping that up to date, and the scripts and the complex configuration, to our wisdom and experience in defining the why. The new elevated value is in strategic judgment, systems thinking, and, as we explored earlier, the ability to manage this socio-technical system called DevOps, not just the machines. Which brings us back to where we started. This too shall pass. How do we know which waves to commit to and which to watch roll past? As any surfer knows, and as I look out there, it looks like a lovely day. What am I doing in here? As any surfer knows, waves can pass in two very different ways. They can pass over you and it can be chaotic and messy with a wipeout that holds you under and churns you around and leaves you gasping for breath and struggling for air. And that's what happens when we're complacent and we turn our back on the waves, or when that wave just turns out to be way bigger than we thought it was going to be. Or they can pass under you and you see it coming and you start paddling hard. Eventually you pop up and you finally get the ride you've been waiting for. The barrel is forming and you exist only in the present, perfectly in sync with all that power. You're inside the green room and you'll remember that one perfect ride for the rest of your life. What if AI coming into DevOps is that perfect ride? Is that wave? There's a new destination for those ready to paddle out into DevOps 2.0 and become the architect of an AI-driven socio-technical system, if you're ready to move up the stack where the value is. Again, we move from writing infrastructure as code to defining infrastructure as intent. Our job is no longer to write 500 lines of Terraform. It's to write a single strategic sentence in plain English that defines the outcome, and then be wise enough to validate that the AI actually got it right and actually did the right thing. Well, how do we get there, right? It's actually not an easy journey. It's a long journey, and it's not a single leap. And this is where those interim jobs that I talked about, the mechanical loom fixer, etc., become so critical. The loom fixer, the webmaster, they weren't dead-end jobs. They were necessary, high-value bridging roles of their day. They were the stepping stones that allowed you to take the road to where the new break is forming. Today, we're seeing the same bridging roles. There's terms out there now like AI ops analyst, AI pipeline architect, even prompt engineer, although I think you'll find that this too has already passed. Right. Some of these job titles may not exist in even 2 years, let alone 5. However, they are still valuable. They're the critical path to take right now. Investing your time in AI and enhanced DevOps isn't a distraction. It's the only practical way to get to where the new break is forming. The old ways of working aren't coming back. The hype and the anxiety will pass as they always have before, but AI isn't a storm that just churns up the water and then goes away. It's a once-in-a-generation swell that will permanently change and reshape the shoreline. So my challenge to you is to stop anchoring to the board that you're on and start looking at the ocean. See the wave that's coming and make a conscious choice to start paddling. That old, reliable sandbar is being carved away, and new breaks are forming in a completely new place. Our old secret spot might be gone, but the new, more powerful breaks are formed in places that currently only a few of us are in on. We, the witnesses to structural change in the landscape itself. Yet our value remains, as it's always been, to watch the sets, to see the pattern, and to pick the wave that's worth the paddle. Surf's up.